David Hume was born on the 26th of April 1711 at Edinburgh. His family wanted him to take up the legal profession, but he did not like it. He had a special fondness for literature and arts and philosophy. In 1748, he published his famous book, Inquiry Concerning Human Understanding. The main publication that followed the inquiry concerning the principles of morals in 1751, Political Discourse of 1752, History of England in 6 volumes from 1754 to 1562, and Dialogues Concerning Natural Religion of 1779. Let's talk about David Hume's greatness as a philosopher. Though Hume's greatness as a philosopher has never been questioned, yet Hume's exact place in the history of philosophy has remained a matter of dispute. Hume is the most consistent empiricist carried out in his philosophy, the skeptical consequences, which ideologically followed from the findings of John Locke and Berkeley. Exposed to Hume's criticism, the world of knowledge, which Locke had no laboriously constructed, despairs altogether and disintegrates into separate and disconnected elements, among which there is no bond of union, no principle of organization. Berkeley had criticized the material substance of John Locke, but inconsistently to his empirical position, he maintained spiritual substances to be real. Hume, in his turn, shows that unreality of the spiritual substances as well as reduce both material and spiritual world into series of loose, disconnected, and discrete sections, but merely the fleeting impressions of the moments. Philosophy of Hume is the last word of empiricism. Here, reason is employed to show the weakness of reason, and reason is in turn against itself. This is a traditional interpretation of Hume's empiricism, but it was Camp Smith who exposed the baselessness of this criticism against Hume. Hume never wanted to demolish metaphysics like John Locke. He also gave much importance to epistemological discussion in philosophy. Hume analyzed the contents of Humean understanding to show Humean mind is not fitted for such abstruse subjects like metaphysics. In fact, Hume wanted to lay the foundation of the true metaphysics as distinguished from false and spurious metaphysics. As Russell observed, we can see the traces of rationalism, empiricism, phenomenalism, and even linguistic philosophy in his writings. David Hume Impressions and Ideas. Section 2 of Inquiry Concerning Humean Understanding introduces Hume's basic empiricistic principle, which is the principle that all our ideas are most feeble, perceptions are copies of our impressions, are more lively ones. Following the same method as John Locke, Hume analyzed human knowledge to its constituents and find that perception, for example, mental state may be divided into two classes in impressions and ideas. The difference between them consists in the degree of force and liveliness with which they strike upon the mind. With those which enter into mind and move with force and violence, we may name them impressions. By ideas, we mean the faint image of these in thinking and reasoning. The word idea was already in use, but Hume used it in a definite sense, defined it as has introduced a new word, impression. While defining idea, the distinction between impression and idea is given now psychological terms, so that the distinction is verifiable and immediate experience. The distinction lies in degree of vivacity, liveliness, and intensity. Ideas are defined by Hume as copies of impression. By the term impression, he means all our moral, lively perceptions when we hear, or we see, or we feel, or love, or hate, or will in inquiry. When we see the red object, we have impression of red, and when the object is removed from our sight or we close our eyes, we still have a faint image of red in our mind. This is the idea of red. An idea is the image or copy of a corresponding impression. According to Hume, we cannot form an idea without a previous impression. A blind man cannot found the idea of red because he has no the previous impression or perception of red. Hume applies his view on the metal experience. Also, he has hated the direct experience of hatred or pain can have the idea of pain or hatred. There is a considerable difference between an idea and an impression. The most lively thought idea is still inferior to the dualist sensation. By the term impression, he means all our more lively experiences when we hear or see or feel or love or hate or desire or will. An impression is distinguished from ideas which are less lively perceptions which we are conscious when we reflect on any of those sensations. All the material of thinkings are derived either from our outward or inward sensation. All our ideas are more feeble perceptions, are copies of our impressions, are more lively ones. Hume proves this by two different arguments. First, we analyze our thoughts or ideas, however sublime or complex, we always find that they resolve themselves into simple ideas as our copies of it copied from president's feelings or sentiments. When we think of a golden mountain, we only join two ideas, gold and mountain, with which we were acquainted before. We from the idea of God as an infinite intelligence, wise, powerful, and benevolent personality. Our experiences of different moral qualities and infinite states are expanded by our imagination. The greater power of mind amounts to no more than the faculty of compounding, argumentating or demonizing the material afforded to us by the senses. Ensure all the material thinking derived from either our outward or inward sensations. The mixture and the composition of these belongs alone to the mind and the will. Secondly, if a man found a defect of an organ, it is not able to have the particular sensation, we always find that he is unable to have the corresponding ideas. A deaf man cannot form no idea of sound. A blind man cannot form idea of color. So Hume's conclusion is no impression, no idea. Here is, however, one contradictory phenomena which we may prove that it is not absolutely impossible for ideas to arise independent of their corresponding impressions. Suppose a person is perfectly acquainted with colors of all kinds except one particular shade of blue. For instance, it is possible for him to form the idea of shade from his imagination. Hume says that he can form the idea of particular missing shade below. But this instance for Hume so singular that it is cannot elder as general maxim, no impression, no ideas.